Welcome to Coping with COVID-19. I'm Dr. Allie Sharma, and I've created this interview series and safe space to share our stories and collectively cope through the COVID-19 pandemic. Please note that this interview series is for informational purposes only, and it's not considered medical advice. Please consult your own provider for any issues you may be facing. And if you are in crisis, please call 911 or call your local emergency services. Today, I am joined by Sierra Campbell, who is a death doula. She has worked in end-of-life care, home health care, and hospice for more than 20 years. During COVID-19, Sierra has shifted her work to educate families more and more and provide virtual funerals. I am bringing on Sierra now to join me. So welcome, Sierra. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Allie.
Yeah. Let's start because I think a lot of people are not familiar with the concept of a death doula. So I'd love to have you hear a little bit more about your profession and what you've been doing to date.
Yeah, absolutely. A death doula is someone who, in many ways, they work with the family as much as they work with the dying. Death doulas help with advanced care directives. We help do everything from run errands to educate the family and the dying on the process. I started working in a nursing home at 16, 24 years ago, 26 years ago. And at 21, I had my first home health care agency. And so I've been at the bedside of the dying all of my adult life. And I find that having experience in some capacity before taking a death doula training is really important, even if it's volunteering for hospice, because it gives you an understanding of how a medical team works with someone through end of life. Hospice is the best example. I volunteer with Visiting Nurse Services in New York, and I recommend if anyone's interested in learning, just to educate yourself, take their training. It gives you so much information about how a doctor works with a social worker, works with a chaplain, works with volunteers, massage therapists. You become, as a volunteer, part of that integral team. And it helps you understand how medicine handles end of life. And a lot of death doulas bring in more of a spiritual component, spiritual, non-religious. We often come in and speak with the dying about their fears, their concerns, and they tend to be more open than with, let's say, a family member or even someone from their religious order who they might not have a very strong connection with, but might come in at the end of life. So that's a little bit about the death doulas. My work has shifted in the last 5 years as more of an educator and less at the bedside. I love helping families have conversations that prepare them for the great unknown.
So now in this time of COVID-19 and the pandemic, look, we know people are dying from COVID-19, but also people are dying as they do. And the normal rituals around grieving, loss, especially the physical component of gathering, it's not there. So can you comment on what you're seeing? And then we'll talk about tips during this time as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and open up this PDF, if that's okay.
Great, yes.
Okay. So I've been working with families to create virtual funerals. And these are families who are not dying of COVID, their family member, but they're unable to gather. And so I've put down a few tips here for families, whether it's COVID related or not. These are the steps that are ordinary. The first thing that a family does is that they write an obituary. Now, after that's taken place and the closest people to the deceased, once they need to congregate and talk about their rituals, their culture, their religion, and how they're going to modify based on what they're able to do given physical distancing. A lot of people have said to me, let's not even do a funeral because we'll do it when we get out of COVID. And the reality is, we don't know when we're going to get out of this isolation. So I highly recommend to do, even if it's a very simple ceremony, within the first 3 weeks of someone's passing. And this is just healthy for your grieving, and it gives the people that are closest to the deceased, it gives them that community, that network of support. And a great way to do this is to choose a conferencing platform. You might want to record the actual, just like we're recording this Zoom, you might want to keep that in mind. You also want to keep in mind that some people might not have internet, so have a dial-in option. 2 leaders are needed for the ceremony, usually a funeral director or a spiritual kind of clergyman, or someone would lead the ceremony in person. Same thing here, but you'll also need one person dealing just with technology. And so if you're going to use Zoom, have that person, it's likely a grandchild or someone young in the family. That person needs to spend some time getting familiar with whichever platform, Google Hangouts, Zoom, what have you. Deal with controversies beforehand. Now, you might not think that there would be controversies at a funeral, but I've been to many of them. I've been at the bedside of more than 100 people through their end of life, and conflict was normal. Death brings up a lot of emotion for people. So if you foresee any conflict that could come up in this ceremony, even though it's virtual, reach out to those people and create some parameters beforehand. Mm. And lastly, involve your people, your collaborators, to create a program with you. These templates are all on canva.com and they are free. And this is an example. There are more than 50 templates. These are directly from Canva. I've changed the dates. When you do a virtual funeral, at the very beginning, at the bottom, you want to remind people to turn their mic off and settle in and have music. As you get with your group and you collaborate before this service, everyone will contribute. Words of prayers, a little ritual in the beginning, whether it's lighting a candle or taking 10 breaths together, the musical selections, everyone will contribute to this. And I highly, highly recommend, if you have musicians in the family, let them perform live right into the Zoom. And again, it's likely that this will be recorded. At the end, I want to mention, beyond the acknowledgements and obituary that you add, it's really important to place all of the prayers and readings that everyone contributes, to put them either in the presentation, for the ceremony, and maybe even print them out and send them to those that are the closest to the deceased. It's just really, and a lot of the messages and words might not make it into the ceremony, but it's really, it means a lot to the people that are closest to the person who's parted. And these are just a few more examples. These are all from Canva. And yeah, the thing that I want to mention here on this is a little bit of a different order of events on the program, video presentation. Some people are camera shy and they might want to say something, but they might not be able to do that in the moment on the fly. There's also a few companies that are giving away their services for free. One of them is tribute.co, Tribute.
Okay.
And that makes it easy to collaborate over video. So companies like this and the ability to do these virtual funerals are likely going to shape a lot of changes that we'll see in funerals to come.
Okay, so Sierra, thank you so much for showing this. I think what I have heard often is that people aren't acknowledging the deaths because there's not that in-person connection. And I think this is a very important reminder that we need to continue our routines, although they're altered, yes, right? And reconfigured, but there is importance in acknowledging in the moment what's happening. And I think people still need to grieve. They still need to express their emotions around this. There's the emotions of everyday life, the emotions of loss of life, and then there's the emotions of COVID, right? So it's really important to confront it and find ways to cope and heal.
Exactly.
Yeah. So any final advice, like on the emotional side of coping and grieving through this time?
My best advice is to continue to gather with your people and use technology to do that. Even if it's just sitting on the phone in silence and being present with, just reach out, even if you feel like there's nothing that someone else can do to take away your grief, and there's nothing that you can do to take away theirs. Just being present for them and saying, I'm here, I'm listening, I know this must be hard, and knowing, what not to say is helpful as well. You're going to be fine, you'll get through this. It's like, no, just be with them where they are in the present moment.
One final thing that actually came to mind, a lot of people are dying alone, right? Especially
Yeah.
if they're dying from COVID, right? We know the restrictions. And since you've been at the bedside by people, at the end of their life, can you tell us what your thoughts are on that aspect, which is really painful, right, for a lot of people to think about?
Yeah. Well, for those that are grieving the loss of someone who's dying alone, there's an experience that has been consistent for every death I've been present for, and that's this incredible lightness when they take their last breath. And that lightness, even though you're not in the room, I want to remind you that you can still be present with them. Okay, so you can feel it when someone takes that last breath. It's like their presence has left. And where do they go? They go to where they're attached. And they're attached to you because they're attached through that bond of love. And so I encourage you to speak out loud, just like they're in the room, talk with them, and know that there's a part of them that can hear you. And that will help you not only not feel lonely, but through that process of not a kind of feeling I can't do anything, there is something you can do. And that's just direct your energy and focus to visualizing them in light, and do your rituals, whatever they are. And if you don't have them, this is time to develop some new rituals around honoring that person and what you love about them, and surrender to what is, and I think it's also a good time to understand the stages of grief. And that's something that maybe we can put on your website to help people understand how after someone passes those stages, how you cycle through them and how you can manage that grief in your day-to-day life.
Thank you so much, Sierra. We'll put all of the resources that you mentioned in this interview available for people who watch this. We really appreciate what you do. It is of utmost importance always, but especially during this time. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Be well.
Thank you, Sierra Campbell, for joining me today. All right, now let's get clinical. What stands out to me from the interview with Sierra are two things. First, the power of grieving loss of life during this time, and the importance of continuing rituals that are important in your culture. So obviously it's not going to be the same types of ceremonies that we know as usual, but it's really important to mobilize your families and communities during this time because it will help to connect on this. Don't let a death pass simply because you are not able to grieve in person. There are ways to connect virtually. In fact, that's the only way we can do it right now, and ways to recreate a funeral that you may see in your culture by using virtual means, by using music, by using prayer, by using words, by using pictures, by using video. It is possible. So please think about how to repurpose and pivot during this time. And then second, there are those with COVID-19 disease who may be dying alone. And I know there's a lot of sadness around this, but Sierra describes what you can do. Although our loved ones with COVID-19 may be alone, you can find ways to connect with them, as Sierra mentioned, in your heart, in your mind, and in your spiritual being, if that makes sense to you. Thoughts are powerful, but we know this is not easy. I'm Dr. Allie Sharma. Thank you for watching Coping with COVID-19 and this important interview on how to grieve with loss of life during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic.